So with that, I think we can kick off. We are already quite a number of people. Good morning and welcome to this expert exchange on coal mine methane. Before we officially start, I have to make a small logistical announcement. This session today will be held in English language, and for all observers that would like to follow the session in Bahasa Indonesia, there is a translation option. And on the following slides, we will provide you with a small guidance on how to access that. And yeah, for all English speakers, this is the chance to learn a few words of Bahasa. So next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, there are two options to get to the translation. The first one, if you're, is to click on the link provided in the chat or on the slide. And the second one is to scan the QR code here on the slide with your phone. And you will then be directed to a web page where you can press and play and you can select the language you want to choose. So next slide. There's one more step you need to complete to mute the original audio of the event. So in case you're using the Teams app, there are 3 steps to follow. First one is to click on the 3 dots to get to the settings of the MS Teams app. Then select audio settings and then turn the volume down or mute. And in case you're joining via browser, such as Google Chrome or Edge or something, you right-click on the tab and select Mute Site or Mute Tab. Next slide, please. Another option is that you can use the Interactio app, which you can download on Apple's iOS Store or Google Play by scanning the QR code here. The event code is IKI JET 2025. You can then press play and choose your language. So, and after these logistical remarks, we can go to the next slide and welcome you officially to the session itself. Welcome to the 9th Expert Exchange. My name is Johannes Lohmeier. I will moderate today's session. I'm working for GIZ in the Global Project Innovation Regions for a Just Energy Transition, or in short, IKI JET. And the project aims to support just energy transitions in 7 countries around the globe. Today's topic is coal mine methane, and the aim of this event is to introduce the topic for interested stakeholders, in particular in our 7 target countries, but also to everybody else who's interested. And amongst others, we will cover some general facts and figures around the global coal mine methane emissions, showing the relevance of the topic. We will discuss data availability and measurement, opportunities to capture and use coal mine methane, and we'll also have a concrete use case of coal mine methane from a German company in China. With that, to the next slide, please. We are very proud to have an excellent panel with us today. Experts from the IEA, UNECE, EMBER, and Eisenmann Environmental Technology, and also my colleague from IKI JET, Sufte Dene. And dear audience, you are also invited to post questions into the chat during the event, and would be great if you could specify which speaker your question is addressing, and we will come later in a Q&A session where we can take up your questions. But now, without further ado, I'll hand over to my colleague Sufte Dene, who will give some introductory information on the IKI JET project, and that is organizing this event. So over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Johannes. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Sufte Dene Otron-Bater, and I work as a junior advisor at the Innovation Regions for Just Energy Transition, in short, the IKI JET project. And I'm very happy to be briefly introducing our project to you today. Next slide, please. So the project is funded under the International Climate Initiative of the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and co-funded by the European Commission. The main objective is to support key stakeholders in targeted coal regions in Chile, Colombia, Indonesia, Mongolia, South Africa, Thailand, and Vietnam to plan for and implement regional just energy transition pathways. The project is being implemented by several institutions, including the International Development Cooperation Agency of the German government, GIZ, Climate Action Network International, International Institute for Sustainable Development, International Labour Organization, Solidarity Center, Union Abroad AFIDA, and the Wuppertal Institute for Climate, Environment and Energy. Our project started in December 2022 and will run until January 2027. Next slide, please. Here you can see our main project components. First of all, the IKI JET project has created an international network of coal regions through the establishment of the Just Energy Transition in Coal Regions Interregional Platform. This facilitates peer-to-peer exchanges, strengthens policy dialogue, supports capacity building, and co-creates just energy transition knowledge. We also have two other components in Indonesia and Colombia for a more in-depth support to these regions. A central part of this interregional platform are our peer-to-peer learning formats called the communities of practice that are both thematic and regional, that enable direct exchange and collaboration among key stakeholders from all our project regions. We also organize annual international policy dialogues and a series of expert exchange webinars like today's session that brings together policymakers, practitioners, and other key stakeholders to share ideas and innovative approaches. Another important element of the JETCR platform is our Knowledge Hub, which is an online platform where we produce, collect, and share knowledge, tools, and resources that are related to just energy transition. On the website, you will not only find information on our project, not only knowledge products from our project, but also wider resources that are relevant to JET. Our colleagues have already posted the link in the chat, so I invite you to explore further, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter as well. About the two other project components, just very briefly, we are facilitating inclusive JET planning through multi-stakeholder engagement in Indonesia and are supporting the creation of energy communities in Colombia. So overall, the IKI JET is a global project that supports stakeholder engagement, JET planning, and policy dialogue across regions in South America, Africa, and Asia. So if you want to learn more about our project, please visit our Knowledge Hub, and also please feel free to reach out to us. And with that, I would like to give the floor back to Johannes and would like to welcome our speakers. Thank you very much. We're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you for providing that context in the introduction, Sufterdene. And with that, we can come to our first speaker, Tomás de Oliveira Bredariol from the IEA. Tomás was the lead author of the Global Methane Tracker 2024 and was involved in the analysis of methane emissions from coal in IEA's World Energy Outlook. And he will provide us with a primer on coal mine methane today. Tomás, the virtual stage is yours. If you can turn on your camera and mic.
Yeah, can you see me? Can you hear me and see me?
We can hear you, yes. And
Okay.
see you as well. So we can start by
Great.
clicking on the next slide.
Great. Should I share my screen or are you going to be running it from your side? I'm happy to share my screen if that's easier.
We have your slides included, so just give us a sign when we can
Sure.
move on to the next one.
Then yeah, go ahead. You can move to the first slide. Great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining today. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I mean, coal mine methane is not something that often gets that much attention, but it definitely should get more attention. It deserves a lot of attention. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the basics of coal mine methane emissions and mitigation. And I'm happy to follow up on any discussions related to either kind of the technology side of things and understanding these emissions, but also related to policies and measures to reduce these emissions. So coal seams, they naturally contain methane, which can be released either during or after mining operations. And this is what we call coal mine methane. Sources of emissions include seepage from coal seams that are exposed in surface or open pit mines, drainage systems used to reduce the methane content of coal deposits, ventilation systems where methane is extracted and vented from underground coal mines, and post-mining activities such as processing, like crushing the coal or storage of the coal and transport. During these activities, methane is still trapped in the matrix of coal, and that can still seep out. Another source is methane emissions from abandoned mines. Also, that's another one to have in mind. But for the coal industry in general, methane is very much treated as a safety issue, because if you have a relatively high concentration of methane in your air within the mine, then that can lead to explosion hazards. But that is not the only reason why we need to be worried about methane emissions. Methane emissions are also an air pollutant, and the second leading cause of global warming globally. To understand a bit more coal mine methane emissions, it's interesting to think about the different types of facilities. So if we're talking about surface mines, then usually the main source of methane emissions are the drainage systems. They have more concentrated flows. Whereas if you're thinking about underground coal mines, then ventilation air methane is usually the largest source. Even if the concentration is very small, the volume of air that is being exchanged, the flow of this ventilation air methane is quite high usually. In general, methane emissions tend to be higher from underground coal mines than from surface mines, as deeper coal seams usually contain more methane than shallower seams. The type of coal also affects its methane content. Lignite, well, peat essentially has no methane or very little methane. Lignite has the lowest methane content after that. And then we've got steam coal and coking coal. So, for example, anthracite has usually more a higher methane content within the different coal ranks. To put this into context, I mean, today about 80% of all coal produced is steam coal, which is mainly used for heat and electricity generation. And about 15% is coking coal, which is mainly used in industry and in particular for producing steel. And the remainder is lignite, which is also quite often used for steam, for heat or electricity generation. And when we look at the emissions, then there's also a big difference in how abatable these are, so how much we can reduce these through existing technologies. The abatement potential is much higher for large, porous underground coal mines and lower for surface mines, where methane emissions are more diffuse and thus harder to capture. Globally, we estimate that about 70% of coal mine methane emissions from underground mines can be abated, while only 20% of these emissions from surface mines can be abated. There's also a difference in the abatement potential between steam coal and lignite and coking coal, which is very much related to the aspects that I was mentioning in terms of the content of the gas. And overall, we estimate that a little over half of all coal mine methane emissions could be reduced with technologies that have already been deployed in different locations around the world. Now let's look at this in more of a regional context. Coal production and related methane emissions are concentrated in a handful of countries. The world's top 4 largest emitters account for around 75% of total coal mine methane emissions. China is clearly the leading one here. It's the largest coal producer, it's the largest coal consumer, it's also the largest emitter of coal mine methane emissions. But there are other countries that emit quite a lot, including Australia, the United States, Kazakhstan, Poland, and here I just put a selection of the countries that are either engaged with the project or are large producers. One thing that's interesting to have in mind here is that in many countries, a relatively a small number of mines are responsible for an outside source volume of emissions. And emissions at these sites, so these are deep underground mines with high methane content, and it's often these are the mines that are most cost effective to abate because you can potentially capture those flows and then use it as energy, either to produce electricity or to heat the mine or to dry the coal. And if you start with these mines where you have a higher potential, then you can often create kind of the network of service providers and knowledge that can spur abatement in other mines where this might be a little bit less cost effective. This could help develop infrastructure to capture the gas, new grid connections, gas processing equipment, and also deal with all the institutional barriers, right, regarding who owns the gas, for example, and who has the right to explore it and to address it. As I was saying, coal mine methane abatement technologies have been implemented in a number of sites around the world, but they are far from being standard industry practice, right? Projects are often hindered by the lack of potential users for power or natural gas, by economic barriers, by legal and regulatory changes around the ownership or other issues. What you're seeing here on the screen is the marginal abatement cost curve of coal mine methane emissions, and everything that is above the horizontal axis has a positive cost.
Thomas?
Yes?
Oh,
yeah. I'm just going through without looking at that. Yeah. Sorry. Can you, because I lost you. Yeah, there you go. Great. That's it. So here, what you're seeing is the marginal abatement cost curve, and everything that's above the horizontal axis is what has a positive cost. So companies are not going to do this by themselves, and that's the majority of emission reductions possible. There is some amount of emissions which is below the horizontal axis. This is usually those mines that I was talking about, so that have a high concentration of methane. And in this case, is capturing it and then selling it as an energy source can actually come at no net cost. It would still require some initial investment, and so it will take a few years before you recover the costs, but in the long run, it can be something that is economically positive. Not many companies do this because it's also not, their main business, or because the return rates are not high enough. But there's certainly some opportunity for cost-effective abatement, and then that can kind of help with the rest. Some of the key ways to reduce these emissions are that same methane that is being already drained by drainage systems. You can either put it into a pipeline, or you can process it to generate power, or you can use it within the mine for heating and drying coal. In some cases, the flow of methane varies, and this means that you can't really be generating power all the time, for example. So you might need to flare some amount of it during these peaks or lows of depending on the flow that is coming out of the mine. These are related to the gasification systems. When we look at ventilation systems, then, as I mentioned, these are often very low concentration of methane. So the main way to reduce these emissions is through ventilation air methane oxidation. This is a specialized equipment which will essentially destroy the methane to reduce its global warming potential, right? Because you're then turning it into CO2. And then there are other sources which can be addressed through efficiency improvements, for example, by better connections, by sealing mine exits, by capturing fugitives, and also by improving your combustion processes where you're already resolving to those. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about abandoned mine methane. This is not something that is very commonly addressed. I think Germany is a very good case of an example where actually this was taken into consideration, and ownership and transfer procedures for abandoned mines were established back in the 90s, and the country is very much active on projects to use abandoned mine methane. They've got a feed-in tariff which has promoted a lot of these utilization. But on a global level, we estimate that abandoned coal mines emitted around 5 million tons of methane in 2024. And here we are also showing abandoned oil and gas wells. These released just over 3 million tons. And you might think that's not very much when you compare with the previous slide where we're looking, for example, for China, and China was emitting, I think, something around 20 million tons of methane emissions. But if you combine these sources, it's equivalent to the world's fourth largest emitter of fossil fuel methane. So it's quite a substantial amount. Now, especially in the coal sector, older facilities tend to emit less than recently abandoned ones because many coal mines will flood. And once they flood, then the hydrostatic pressure will make it so that methane emissions stop to being released essentially, or are released in a much lower rate. So it's very important to capture that kind of window of, it depends a bit on what is the rate of flooding, but this can be 5 years, 10 years, sometimes as little as 3 years. And then in the mines that are not flooding, then these emissions can continue for a very long time. So it's very important that these are addressed. This can mean sealing the abandoned mine, directing the methane flow to oxidation technologies, to flaring, or to coal mine methane utilization. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what regulators can do. Certainly, with regards to abandoned mines, one part of this is ensuring that the closure plans from the mines, they take into account methane emissions and ways to address these. There are other ways. This can include emissions trading schemes, offsets, or different incentives so that operators or service providers can capture these methane emissions and put them to use or destroy them. But if we move to the next slide, we can see a few other options that have been used in different places of the world. And I think it's useful to go through some of these examples. So China, a few years ago, set an emission standards for coal mine gas. So essentially what they said is if the methane concentration is above a certain threshold, then operators need to either oxidize it or to use it. And recently they increased that threshold so as to ensure that more mines are addressing methane emissions. This is in a sense a bit of a performance standard, right? You're ensuring that whenever you have a leaky or a gassy mine, then which are the ones that are usually releasing more methane, then you have a way to address these. But this is not the only way to do this. The EU methane regulation, which is recently approved in 2024, limits venting from thermal coal mines starting in 2027. So essentially, this is a flat ban on all the steam coal and the lignite that is being produced and all the ventilation systems that are associated with that. And what is being required is then that either these flows are flared or go to oxidizer or otherwise used. This is very much a prescriptive approach, right? You need to do this, and it's relatively easy to control as well. Now, if we look at the experience of Vietnam, for example, they have established an action plan that targets a specific reduction from methane emissions from coal mines, and its NDC calls for support to reduce methane leakage in fossil fuel extraction. This is a bit more of a target-based approach, and it certainly requires a bit of effort towards implementation, but it also provides an important signal for the industry and also for international stakeholders that might be willing to work on this topic. If we look at the case of Australia, they have got a mechanism that essentially means that operators cannot increase their emissions over time. And this also allows for offsets. So it provides an incentive for some operators to go beyond the minimum requirements and do more to reduce these emissions. I already mentioned the case of Germany and the promotion of the use of abandoned methane through feed-in tariffs. But that's an important case, a successful one. We can also mention the case of California. They have a cap-and-trade system, and that has led to a lot of projects. Initially, a lot of flaring projects, but also some projects to take coal mine gas to pipelines with some additional processing to ensure that it meets the standards required for natural gas used in pipelines. But this was an important incentive because it allowed different actors that are within the system to buy these offsets and meet their allowances. And lastly, the case of Kazakhstan, they've got a national methane emissions inventory and reduction program that is looking to monitor and reduce methane emissions across a variety of sources, including coal mining. I think those were the key examples that I wanted to go through. As I was mentioning, while the industry may take some action on its own, most mitigation are not cost effective without pricing externalities. So policy and regulation will be quite important. And these strategies need to take into account technical, the institutional, the economic barriers, and really promote a mix of carrots and sticks to promote best industry practice. We ourselves, we have developed a regulatory roadmap and toolkit to address coal mine methane emissions, which goes through some of the steps that policymakers can take to reduce methane emissions from the coal sector and dives into an experience of different countries that have already worked on this. And it's something that's available online on our website, and you're very welcome to use it and explore a bit all of the work and the policy tracking that we do around this topic. That's all I had. Happy to take questions either now or later from the audience and follow up as needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tomasz, for that great introductory presentation. Emphasizing the importance of policy and regulations also. Just a quick follow-up from my side. I introduced you as the lead author of last year's edition of the Global Methane Tracker. Will there be an update this year? And if yes, when?
Absolutely, yeah. It's in the works. I mean, to be honest, it's mostly ready, but this month it's been quite busy for the agency. There are a lot of reports coming out. We're organizing an energy security summit with the UK government later in April. So we thought that it might be best to do this in early May, just to ensure that it gets the attention that it deserves. But yeah, you can be on the lookout for that. It should come out early next month.
Thank you. Looking forward to that one. And with that, let's move on to the next intervention. We are delighted to have Chiara Giamberardini and Michael Drabik from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, UNECE, with us. Chiara is an Economic Affairs Officer in the Sustainable Energy Division of UNECE based in Geneva and Secretary of the Group of Experts on Coal Mine Methane and Just Transition. She has over 20 years of experience in international development. And Michael, he also works with UNECE since 2015. He currently holds a position of an Economic Affairs Officer in the Sustainable Energy Division and works on matters related to coal mine methane and just transition. And they will speak about data availability and data measurement of coal mine methane, addressing the challenges associated to that. Chiara, Michael, I hand over to you. Who's first?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I go first with a few slides and then we alternate with Michael. Thank you so much for the invitation and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you and to join forces with the Just Energy Transition in Core Regions initiatives. We are very pleased that we are exchanging, so to bring also the experience from another region and actually where we have experts also globally working also outside of our region, and we think it's very interesting and good that this topic is getting the due attention and it's being connected also to the topic of just transition. We are, and if you could go to yes, the next slide, please. We have a group of experts on coal mine methane and just transition, so dealing exactly with these two topics, and it has been working on these for 20 years. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary, and I'm pleased that with us today we are mixing a bit our audiences, and we have some of our experts from all over the world with us today. So as you can see from this slide, we have a very similar mission to both help countries in the transition out of fossil fuels and specifically from coal, and also to mitigate the emission from coal mine methane operations, including during the operation and after the mines are closed or abandoned. Next slide. We do this through a group of experts where we have experts gathering physically once per year and then working during the course of the year through mainly online trainings and exchanges, collaboration to the development of knowledge products, and also capacity building and technical cooperation activities, including through our centers of excellence in Poland and China. We have 3 task forces that discuss topics of relevance to today's topic, one focused on methane emission reduction, one on the safe operation and closure of mines, and one on just transition. Next, please. I don't think we need to go again through to the issue of making the point of why methane reduction is important. This has been already explained very well by Thomas. And so just to say again that the energy sector is one of the main responsible for methane emissions, and so coal mining contributes to approximately 12% of the global man-made methane emissions. So really acting on this is very critical. And after going through the challenges, we want to make the point on the importance of monitoring, reporting, and verification programs. Here I put just some points about the international, regional, national obligations or commitments that countries have made, just to state again that really knowing our emission is requested when signing to a pledge or the Paris Agreement. And we hope also that regional initiatives like the EU methane regulation will help us really move towards better understanding of these emissions. We also wanted to bring to your attention some other conventions that you may not be very aware of, and they are serviced by the UNECE. This is the Aarhus Convention on Access to Information, Public Participation in Decision-Making, and Access to Justice in Environmental Matters. So you can go and explore more in detail, but this is basically giving you really stressing the importance of access to information on emissions, and the protocol on pollutant releases, which includes methane emission, really gives legally binding standards on how to report pollutants and how to make them accessible through the protocol portal. So please explore those and reach out to your focal point for the protocol in your countries to see how you can find synergies on this work. Next, please. Again, here is just to say that you really need to know where your emission sources are at different levels, at the national, subnational, and local levels, in order to act. And unfortunately, many national level inventories are, as of today, not sufficiently detailed or source specific to allow for strong mitigation policies. Therefore, we have been advocating for the importance of monitoring, reporting, and verification programs to better understand the contribution of coal mine methane to the overall emissions and find mitigation opportunities. Unfortunately, though, only a few such programs exist as of today. Next slide. So here, going through the data challenges, we can confirm that in our exchanges with our experts, this lack of data comes very high as the issues that really deter further action on coal mine methane reduction. In a recent Global Methane Initiative coal mine subcommittee meeting, the lack of transparent, reliable, and timely data on coal mine methane was found to be the first barrier, #1 barrier, for coal mine methane abatement projects. And why is that? Well, we do lack globally harmonized and consistent data on coal mine methane and abandoned mine methane and surface mine methane. which makes comparison challenging. We also lack centralized data repositories. So while probably, I mean, most of this information exists, among others for safety reasons in underground coal mines. However, it remains scattered and included in highly technical reports, which are of difficult access to the public and also to policymakers. So this, let's say, difficult to interpret nature of the data makes action difficult. We also see a high number of data coming from estimates based on generic emission factors rather than direct measurement. So the insufficiency of measured emission data is another big issue, because the estimates are far from being as accurate as it would be empirical data. So this is because of limited deployment of methane monitoring technologies, which then brings to infrequent, incomplete, and unverified, and hence low quality of the data. This, as has been mentioned already, is partly due to the weak regulatory frameworks and limited incentive for companies to invest in methane monitoring and mitigating, which can be quite costly and complex. And the reporting to UNFCCC is still voluntary, and not many coal-producing countries submit their emissions. Other issues relate to the scarcity of historical data to analyze trends and poor data sharing infrastructure across institutions and borders. So with this, I would like to pass the floor to Michael. On the next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and hello everyone. Before I start, I just want to say something that Chiara already mentioned, that there is a number of experts from our group of experts with us today, so I'm very happy about it, and also want to ask them that if I miss something in my presentation, please feel free to add to what I said during the Q&A session. So moving to the slides, we have just heard about the challenges related to data, and now I would like to take a step back and briefly focus on the process of obtaining data. So if we can still go back to the previous slides, I'm sorry. Previous, if you can go back. Okay, here, perfect. And I would like to focus on obtaining data, because making data available, it's possible only after we actually have this data, after we collect it. So monitoring emissions is crucial for a number of reasons, for evaluation of mine safety, for planning, executing, and evaluating methane recovery projects, and for methane emission mitigation and reduction efforts. For all those three purposes, it is necessary to have precise data, whether it is about ensuring safety, planning the future production, or mitigating the emissions for environmental reasons. We do not want to make mistakes, and insufficient data creates uncertainty, and uncertainty hampers accurate estimates of emission, hampers project feasibility assessment, and hampers adoption of relevant mitigation strategies and proper regulatory intervention. So what are the sources of data? There is site-level data, there is remote sensing data, there are national inventories, and public data and emission modeling based on public and scientific data. However, as we know, national inventories are not in every country, and it is the purpose of for the purpose of their creation that the subject is often discussed. And public data, as it was already mentioned, is often not easily accessible, overly technical, and contradictory. Consequently, as we have already heard from Chiara, what constitutes the real challenge is reliability of data. So site-level measurements have the lowest level of uncertainty, but the data can be costly to collate and maintain, and it depends on the proper calibration of equipment. As for remote sensing, it's sensitive to weather conditions and often lacks the time series data and site-level corroboration. Next slide, please. So moving to now we're going backwards. If we can go to the next slide, I'm sorry. Next slide. And then next, okay, perfect. So moving to site level measuring, and I will be speaking mostly about underground active coal mines. Site level measuring is the most accurate way of measuring emissions. And all around the world, methane concentrations have been carefully measured for safety reasons for a long time. However, concentration is only one of the variables that need to be measured. To know the total volume of methane released from a coal mine, one needs to know first the volume of air throughput over a period of time, and then the concentration of methane in that volume of air during the time period at the shaft exhaust fan, and if it is used at the gas drainage measurement point. So for mine ventilation, total volume of air exiting a mine shaft can be measured using anemometers, pitot tubes, or flow sensors, which measure the velocity of air passing through the shaft. And in case of gas drainage, volumetric flow meters are used, which calculate volume on the basis of first the velocity of gas passing through a pipe, and then the pipe's inner cross-sectional. Next slide, please. But as I mentioned already, to get accurate data, proper calibration of equipment is necessary. And besides of that, measurement must be taken at locations which are relevant for emission monitoring. So for ventilation measurements, they should be taken in the exhaust shaft or in each roadway at the intersection of all roadways and the upcast shaft, or at the shaft fan. As for the gas drainage measurement, the measurements should be done at the wellhead for individual surface boreholes or at the centralized gas collection stations. Next slide, please. Moving to remote sensing, recent technological developments allow us to collect data independently of mine operators, which is great. It gives us this advantage that we do not need to rely on the data reported by mines. We can check it independently. And such measures can be done by installing measuring detecting equipment on aircrafts or drones and flying them over area that is subject to measurement, or measurement can be done by satellites. In case of the latter, however, we need to remember that instruments are optimized for different tasks, and I will be talking about it in a second. And therefore, for the sake of accuracy, there is a need to establish a unified observing systems that it's fit for the infrastructure that is to be observed. Next slide, please. So each satellite has its own weaknesses and blind spots. So for example, Tropomi is limited to large emissions and therefore is great for detecting super emitters, but requires combination with high spatial resolution satellites, such as those used by GHGSat, for obtaining more precise data on exact sources of emissions. So, there are those satellites which are covering the very wide area of terrain and spot the high emissions, but then they're not technically capable of zooming in for the exact point sources of emissions. And there are those, the second type, which is great at very precise measuring the precise point sources of emissions. However, it would be very inefficient to fly them all around the world trying to spot the emissions. So those two need to work together as a system. We need to also remember that no satellite provide constant observation. And this is important because flow of methane as a source can vary within a day or even hourly, as it depends on pace of coal production, geology, ventilation velocity, barometric pressure, etc. And this is, by the way, the basis on which mine operators often question data obtained by satellites, claiming that the observations are not representative for the whole period in question and that they are skewed by the observed unusual discharges. Therefore, again, corroboration with mine level measurements is necessary, which somehow is a bit paradoxical because this remote sensing is supposed to provide us with ability to measure methane emissions without relying on the data reported by coal mines, but at the same time, for the sake of precision of the data that we obtain, the actual corroboration with mine level measurement is necessary. So this cooperation is still needed. Next slide, please. So we briefly covered monitoring. However, we have to remember that in addition to sound monitoring, reporting and verification are also needed to deliver quality data. In terms of reporting, it has to be ensured that facilities have the technical capacity to correctly monitor, measure, and report data. There is a need to balance the burden that is put on reporters and the level of detail that is sufficient for mitigation. And there is a need to ensure that developed reporting system is easy to access and facilitates documentation, meaning that the data management system is put in place. As for verification, we have to ensure that measurements are consistent, complete, and aligned with equipment standards and procedures. that the results are calculated accurately and checked for consistency, and that we have to enable for independent verification. And with all that, we will be able to build a robust MRV programs that will allow to establish a clear baseline of methane, form an understanding of the variation in methane flows and concentrations, provide information for setting up accurate inventories, and provide project developers with confidence in gas availability over time. Thank you, and back to you, Chiara. Next slide, please.
Yes, I think I want to just put them out there. These are our best practice guidance on how to address effective management and use of coal mine methane, abandoned coal mines, and monitoring, reporting, and verification. We also flagged the recent best practice on ventilation air methane mitigation. All of these are available for download on our website. Next slide, please. And just a couple of examples of tools and resources that we are collaboratively working with our experts in producing and implementing in countries that wish to do so. And I just want to give 2 examples of the methane emission reduction task force has developed a template for estimating coal mine methane emissions. This is an easy to use and customizable Excel-based template. And you can find it online and find more information on how to use it. And you can reach out if you have questions. We have been exchanging on this, getting feedback from the Polish Center, for example, recently on, and so we are always working on improving it. But we believe it's a useful tool for estimating coal mine methane emissions. And next slide, please. Another is Michael just talked about the importance of reconciling top-down and bottom-up data, and we are working on a guidelines methodological approach on this reconciliation together with IMEO of UNEP and other members of our task force. So with this, we again leave you with some information. Next slide on our task force that is of relevance to this work, and invite you to check us out on the website and join our exchange there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara and Michael, also for showing us what UNECE in the group of experts does on coal mine methane and just transition. I think it's very important work and great tools, and I assume there are plenty of connecting points for our audience. And I would also like to come back to your offer on that very slide. I look forward to discussing and exchanging. So please, dear audience, for questions, please post them in the chat or on the Q&A section, and we will address that later. But now we still have, we're getting more and more concrete. We still have 2 interventions. And the next one is Sabina Assam from the energy think tank EMBER. Sabina is a coal mine methane analyst with over 10 years of experience in the environmental sector. And she will talk about opportunities and challenges of the usage of coal mine methane. And we are looking forward to that. Sabina, please. We still cannot hear you. At least I cannot hear you.
Unmuted now?
Yes, now it works fine. Thank you.
Great. Yes, pleasure to be here today with you all. My name's Sabina. I work at EMBER as a coal mine methane analyst. And if we go to the first slide of my presentation. Yes, so I will be talking to you about the different opportunities to capture and destroy coal mine methane today. But just to recap, I guess what the past 2 presentations have covered is just to highlight what a significant source methane from coal mines really is. So at EMBER, we compiled different estimates and have found that it could be anywhere between 38 to 87 million tons of methane emitted per year by coal mines. So just to put that into perspective, you know, if we convert that to CO2 equivalent, you're looking at a similar warming impact to the total annual CO2 emissions of the US. That's the world's 2nd largest CO2 emitter. So we are dealing with a really important source. But there is good news, and that is that the technology exists to mitigate almost all of these emissions. Now, I know that's a bold statement, but hopefully in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to take you through why the technology is not the issue in mitigating these methane emissions. There are other barriers. Next slide, please. So mitigating methane from coal mines isn't new. It's proven and scalable. The first project was reported in 1978. Since then, there have been 412 documented mitigation projects, and 230 projects are currently in operation, with 10 in the development or planning stage. So these are all projects that have been listed by the Global Methane Initiative. And if you look on the plot on the right, you'll see where are these mitigation projects taking place. China has the highest number of operational mitigation projects. Of course, China also has the highest number of coal mines, but yeah, they're also number one in terms of who's got the most active projects happening. You'll then see there's the United States, Australia, and a number of countries in Europe, and also Russia. And just to say, in Europe, many of the mitigation projects are actually focused on mitigating methane from abandoned or closed mines. Next slide, please. So what are the opportunities that we have basically to capture or mitigate methane from coal mines? And it really depends on the type of mine and the source. So an underground mine, we have three opportunities or three sources in which we can capture the methane. That's from the drainage, the ventilation, air, and once it's been closed, so closed or abandoned. Whereas for surface mines, we really just have one opportunity, and that's pre-drainage, so draining the drainage of methane. I'm going to go through each of these now. And I guess an important thing to highlight also is that with coal mines, we know exactly where the methane is being emitted. It's not a source that we need to go and find where the leaks are. It's an emission, and we know exactly where it is. Next slide, please. So active underground mines, one of the first ways in which we can capture methane is from methane drainage. So this is when you capture the high purity gas at its source before it enters mine airways. So you can drain it from the coal seam before or after mining the tunnels. This way to capture the methane really results in capturing high concentrations of methane. So it's a methane source that can very easily be utilized for energy recovery, selling the gas, or if you can't use it, it's possible to flare it. And something with methane drainage is that mines often already have this infrastructure in place, because if it's an underground gassy mine, they might already have to be draining the methane in order to start safe operations. So it's sort of seen as a low-hanging fruit in terms of the mitigation of from coal mines, from underground coal mines. Next slide, please. Ventilation air methane is, I guess, seen as a more complicated methane source in the coal mining world. So this is when methane from the coal seams is seeping into the mine air shafts, and then this will make its way to the atmosphere. So this is really it's a source with a really large volume, but really dilute methane concentrations, which means that it can be harder to utilize it. The methane can definitely be destroyed, though. That's not an issue. We generally, the most common technology is what we say RTOs, regenerative thermal oxidizers, for which I think the next presentation is going to go into much more detail on. And in some cases, when the concentrations are high enough, you can also generate electricity. So really, there's not an issue to destroy the methane. The issue can sometimes more come around when it's trying to utilize that methane. Next slide, please. So yes, so the challenge isn't the technology, it's really in the incentives. So for example, the drainage gas is the easiest opportunity to utilize and profit from coal mine methane. And there's currently 175 mitigation projects operational. Ventilation air methane, on the other hand, actually comes at an average cost of $8 per ton of CO2 equivalent. That's the newest number from the UNECE. And currently there's only 14 projects operational. So you can also see this on the plot on the right. Everything that is in green is the number of drainage gas projects in time. And so you'll see 2/3 of all the reported mitigation projects are actually using a drainage gas. And it can be used for combined heat and power, domestic use, gas sales. You'll see power generation is used a lot, whereas other mitigation projects for which VAM is also included, it's in grey, and it just, there's not as many around. Next slide, please. So for closed underground mines, once an underground mine is no longer mining coal, it does not mean that the emissions stop. All this remaining coal in the coal seams that has not been mined, the methane contained there can continue to also seep into the ventilation air shafts, and this will also eventually make its way to the atmosphere if the mine hasn't been closed properly. So these emissions typically occur at well-defined point sources, such as ventilation shafts or pressure relief vents, and the methane emissions from these mines can be reduced to almost zero if they're flooded, sealed well, or if the methane is captured and used as a resource. I just compiled the most common uses for methane from abandoned or closed underground mines, and the two most common would be used in combined heat and power and in power generation. Next slide, please. Here I wanted to show an example. As Thomas mentioned, Germany does have a great example of using abandoned coal mine methane. And if you look on the left, you'll see in the green line is the reported abandoned mine methane emissions from Germany from 1990. And in the 2000s, this suddenly drops once there were incentives for companies to capture and use this abandoned mine methane. And in the first 16 years, they already avoided 100 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So here what happened is that the methane was extracted using degassing pipes and fed into heat and power plants, and the electricity produced was fed into the grid, and waste was used to generate hot water in households. And so you can see the produced power and the produced heat on the plot on the right. And the latest figure that I found for 2023 was that this abandoned mine methane was still supplying around 67,000 households with heat and 234,000 households with electricity. Next slide, please. So active surface mines, what can we do here? There's really only one option up until today, which is pre-drainage. And effective drainage and capture of methane at surface mines requires that drainage holes are drilled in advance of mining, so before mining a certain coal seam. This is really not a widely used at all. I think it would be hard to find examples of this already used around the world, but this is really because surface mines haven't had to worry about their methane emissions before. So surface mines don't have to worry about their methane emissions in terms of safety, and also in terms of actually monitoring their methane emissions. It's not really on their radar, methane, but this is slowly changing. So for example, in Australia, coal mines, also surface mines, will have to start in a way paying for their emissions, and methane is included in this. And this has led to, if we go to the next slide, please. This has led to this most recent study that came out this year, which looked at pre-drainage at surface mines in the Bowen Basin. So the Bowen Basin is Queensland's major coal, Australia's major coal mining basin, and there's a lot of surface mines. And what this study found was that by applying pre-drainage, they could reduce the coal mine methane emissions by 38 to 46%. So a really big possibility to reduce emissions here. And the study also looked at different opportunities which might enhance the financial viability of pre-drainage at surface mines. What the study found was that displacing the diesel with the methane drained would provide the highest positive cash flow for surface mine mitigation options. So that's above electricity generation and selling the gas. And obviously, this is in a context in which a coal mine would otherwise have to pay for their CO2 equivalent emissions. Next slide, please. So to summarize, always the best mitigation strategy is to keep the coal in the ground. When we mine coal, there will be some methane emitted, and that is unavoidable. So really, the best thing is to reduce the amount of coal mined. However, for active and closed coal mines, the technology to mitigate methane emissions is proven and has been used globally. So mitigation options can be profitable to mines when the methane can be utilized. This is not always the case. So what's holding us back? It can sometimes be a very costly investment, especially when the methane can't be utilized, or if the coal mine has to start using a lot of different types of technology that they don't already have on site. This leads to then the lack of incentives for coal mines, which we say carrots and sticks. So, or carbon credits, for example, or sticks would be a regulation which requires coal mines to pay for their methane emissions. In general, there's also a knowledge gap, not just on the level that coal mines, a lot of them haven't really understood how much methane they're emitting, so how much methane they could also be capturing, but also in terms of policymakers really understanding how feasible these technologies are to mitigate or reduce methane emissions at coal mines. And lastly, there is some industry resistance. Coal mines want to mine coal. They don't want to have to, make a lot of effort to reduce methane emissions, which is sometimes the case. And that is the end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Sabina. Great presentation and information, and you opened and also closed with a clear statement. Technology exists to mitigate almost all emissions, we'll maybe come back to that in the Q&A. But I said we are getting more and more concrete, and if we go to the next slide, we invite Peter Bergertz to the virtual stage. Peter is the head of sales for Eisenmann Environmental Technology, and he is an engineer by education. We learned from Sabina's intervention that methane can be destroyed using regenerative thermal oxidizers, RTOs. And I think in the next 10 to 15 minutes, Peter will present an application case, how coal mine methane is used in an economically viable way in China using German technology. And Peter, we are happy to have you here. The stage is yours, and you can please share your presentation now.
Yeah, Johannes, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to this conference here. And I think Sabina has given a very good introduction for me. So knowledge and references are there. And that is what I will show. It's a little bit technical. I hope not too much. I will not go too much in detail. Perhaps afterwards we have some questions. So I will share my screen that I can present it here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, see your screen if you go now in presenter mode.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
So Eisenmann coal mine methane installation in China. So the plants which we have built in this area are all in China. I mean, it's the biggest market, and I will show more in detail. I'm from Eisenmann Environmental Technology. We are part of the Dorotech group, and we are doing already regenerative thermal oxidizers since '87 with a special system, which I will show you. But that means the technology is well developed and it's really suitable. And yeah, sometimes we are astonished that there are on the market some ideas, which really don't fit to this, to the technical background, let's say. So Eisenmann, we make environmental technology now for 57 years, starting here in 1968 with a thermal oxidizer. And we have built more than 2,800 plants. And from these 2,800 plants, there are 550 RTO plants. And in the air treatment, which is interesting for the CMM projects, there are different technologies, thermal technologies. And one thing is the catalytic, for instance, which we are also building, especially in Australia. They think the catalytic ones are perhaps a better solution than the regenerative ones. So there we have there's a project, I think, also ongoing where they will check it. I think the regenerative, if they make the global energy balance, is still the technology which has to be used because the overall input of energy is smaller than for the catalytic one. So how does an RTO works? It's the process gas is entering the RTO. You have a bed of ceramic heat exchanger. The heat is the cold air is coming in, is heated up by this hot ceramic heat exchanger, is going through a combustion chamber at 850 or 950 degrees. And then the hot gas is giving back the energy to this ceramic bed, and then it's coming out of the system. And the high efficiency is shown. You come in with 25 degrees, you heat up to 850, and you cool down again to 65 degrees. That means the delta T between inlet and outlet is only 40 degrees. And with this 40 degrees, you need to operate the system, which means that if you put in so much energy that you can heat the process gas by 40 degrees, then you don't need any additional gas. If you're injecting it here or there, doesn't matter. But that means that's the autothermal point of the system, and that can be calculated. And that is normally around 2 grams of VOCs, volatile organic compounds. That's where we normally use these RTOs. And this is equivalent to 0.2, even 0.18, 107% methane. And if you have 0.2% methane at the inlet gas, you don't need any gas here. The system runs on itself, and you need only energy for this fan here. If you have higher concentration of methane, then the system would heat up. And what we are doing then is we have a hot gas bypass, which is coming out here. And then we use these hot gas bypass with 850 to 950 degrees and go to a thermal heat recovery or mostly a steam production heat exchanger here and recover the heat out of the system. And the big advantage is if you have higher concentrations that you don't have only the carbon credits. If you are 0.2% methane, you don't need gas, but you can't get energy out. And that means the only income is the carbon credits. If you have higher concentrations of methane, 0.4, 4, maximum 1.2%, because it's not allowed to go higher in the system with this preheating, then you can recover energy. So if you go in with 1.2% methane, you can get a lot of kilowatt out of this system and also get the carbon credits. That's the principle of the CMM methane mitigation systems where you don't have only WAM. I will show you in a minute. So this I will make quite short. So there are mainly 3 systems on the market. The easiest and the cheapest system is a 2-chamber system. You go in, the off gas, the VAM or whatever, or the mixture is heated from the bed to the gas. You get the energy, and then the gas gives the energy back. And after 60 seconds, you have to switch the valves, because otherwise this bed is cold and this one is too hot. So you switch other way around, and then you run like this. The problem is that this chamber here is still full of methane, because it's not incinerated yet. That means if you switch, you get each minute a peak like this. That leads, there's no purging stage, and the emission peak in the clean gas is regular at each switching of the valves. Each time, every 60 seconds, you get a peak like this. And by this, the highest methane destruction rate is normally only 95%, with some tricks, with the puff cleaner, 98%. So low clean gas values cannot be achieved, but you have low investment cost. To overcome this, you have to purge the chamber. This leads to the 3-chamber systems, which you see here. That means it's the same. The off gas comes in, is heated, comes out here. But before this chamber gets to the clean gas chamber, it's purged here. And then this methane, which is still in this chamber, is going back to the system. So what you see here, you have an emission curve where you don't have the peaks. That means you have methane destruction rates 99+%, which has two effectives. One is you get more carbon credits, and you also get more energy out. And then Eisenmann has developed a 10-chamber system with a rotary valve below. The principle is generally the same as a 3-tower RTO. There's a purge phase after the exhaust gas stage. You see it here. The blue one is the purge. The green is the clean gas. So if you look here, this one is now exhaust air, purged, clean gas, exhaust air, clean gas. And like this, it turns around, and you have only to purge 1/10 of the system. By this, you have no emission peaks. You have a very high VOC damage rate, 99.6%. And like this, high economic benefits and social benefits, because the efficiency is so high, but the system is a bit more expensive than the 2-chamber system. So here you see it. I will not go more in detail. This is a rotating system. This one is rotating. Here you have the 10 chambers. You have only one motor, not 9 flaps for the other system. Low maintenance, high reliability, low clean gas values by effective purging, which is very important, 99.6%. So it's really very low methane which is coming out of the system. These plants can be built from 10,000 to 120,000 norm cubic meter per hour. And here that was our first plant, which we have built in China, 100,000. Already in 2010, everybody thought about the Kyoto Protocol, that there will be carbon credits, which have to be paid by everybody. But I mean, then in Copenhagen, it was not resoluted. That means in 2010, it was not economically viable. So we built this plant also in the mountain area. We showed that it works, but they only operated for quite a short time, because it was not economic, only for VAM mitigation. And that's a problem. It depends totally on the CO2 credits, how much the amount is. We have already seen with $20, $15 to $20, it can be economic, but at this time it was much lower. So there is a technology from the industry where you can use these hot gas bypass. That's the plant of the waste gas stream of adhesive type coating process. This plant is in China. This one is in Vietnam. And there we have 2 RTOs, which you see here with this rotating distributor, 100,000 norm cubic meter per hour, VOC treatment efficiency 99.6%. And there each RTO has a steam boiler which produces 8.5 tons waste heat and a saturated steam of 170 degrees, which can be used directly in the production machines. And these systems run really autothermal with zero gas at 0.2% methane or 2 grams VOC. And if you come in with higher concentrations, then you can produce steam. So this we are transferring now to the coal mine CMM projects. And generally they have these 5 boxes. You have a gas delivery. You have a special mixing box because we want to have higher concentrations up to 1.2%. We have the RTO. We have a steam boiler and a steam utilization afterwards to produce electricity. Because the biggest, if we have higher concentrations than 0.2% methane, there's no gas consumption, but you need some electricity to run the high volume of air through the RTO. So what is the tendency? We mix exhaust gas 1 to 30%. It could be drainage gas, mostly with the spent ventilation air, so with the VAM, or also with fresh air to 1.2% methane. So 1.2% is the maximum which is allowed to put in a regenerative oxidizer, because this is 25% of the lower explosion limit of methane. Therefore, the security of the process is guaranteed, and the target is to provide as much methane as possible, maximize the performance of oxidation equipment, recover as much heat of the methane as possible. Because for the system, if we run it with 0.2%, it also has the effect of reducing the emissions to the atmosphere, but the system is the same if you have 1.2% and reduce down to 20 ppm methane, or if you have 0.2%. So it's much more effective if you get in with higher concentrations. Then you have the Eisenmann 10-chamber valveless regenerative thermal oxidizer. You have methane oxidation at high temperature, very high destruction rate, 99.6%, high thermal efficiency, 95%, which leads to this delta T of 40 degrees Celsius. And like this, you have a very high carbon emission reduction. And additionally, you have methane release of a lot of heat, and carbon emission reduction for carbon trading is a second income. So you have 2 incomes.
Peter,
So then,
maybe I'm sorry to interrupt you. Maybe a short reminder that we have 4 minutes left, because we would allow for some questions as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm nearly finished. So the exhaust gas boiler is then here. We use a waste heat from the hot gas bypass, produced saturated and superheated steam, and can use this in the turbine to produce electricity. So that is the principle, which is already economic without any carbon credits. And with the carbon credits in the moment at China, it's around 95 RMB. It's very viable and very interesting. And here you can see some examples. Here RTO with waste heat steam boiler, 104,000 norm cubic meter gas mix, 10 tons per hour overheated steam. The second example, here is a gas mix with 45,000 gas with 2.5 to 3% methane. And here 60,000 cubic meter of fresh air, because they don't have VAM. We control automatic at 1.2%, and then you can take out the high temperature flue gas and produce steam and electricity. And the last plant, which was installed last year, gas mix for 1 RTO, 6,700 cubic meter with 15% methane, 103,000 ventilation air methane, and here produced 22 tons per steam. So it makes 5.5 megawatt electricity. Here you see the mixing box, which is very important, RTO and automatic control system, so that the technology is there really to mitigate. And if there's additional drainage air or something available, it's already now economic at these prices which we have now. Thank you very much. I think we don't hear you, or I don't hear you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So maybe now.
Yes,
I
now we
wanted
hear
to
you.
thank you for the presentation and the cases. It was very interesting to see the technology as well, well explained. And yeah, I think that case illustrated quite well how CMM is being used to produce energy or heat. Yeah, so now we come to the questions of you, dear audience. There have been some questions already, and I would maybe start with the one regarding the emissions from abandoned mines. Maybe that goes to Michael or Chiara from UNECE. How good do you think the data situation is on this, on coal mine methane emissions from abandoned mines? So can we reasonably be sure that this is a complete data set that we're having?
Well, just a brief answer. From my understanding, it's really no, it's not a complete data set, and we don't have very good data, even more for the case of AMM. And these are issues that we hope will improve, including through the recent EU methane regulation. But I let it other experts to address more in detail.
I mean, if I could also maybe just, I'm sorry, I didn't turn on my camera, just very briefly adding to what Chiara said, I think that, with abandoned mine methane, when we think about mines in, let's say, Western European context, we normally imagine those huge industrial complexes that are very easy to spot, let's say. But in many places in the world, the mines look very, very different, and they are in much more remote places. And then after many years, it's actually it's difficult to know where they were. So, in China alone, there is like thousands of mines that have been closed over the last 10 years or so. So the first problem would be actually to identify, to locate all those mines where they are before we even start measuring, and this is already going to be the challenge to actually identify those mines. And then the other problem is of course with regulation. I mean, there is, as Chiara said, European Union methane regulation now is trying to address this problem, but in many countries it is not really addressed. It needs to be regulated to make sure that there is a requirement to actually measure the emissions from abandoned mines, and then there is a lot of issues related to this, related to to the ownership, to technical issues and so on. I mean, technically, of course, it's no problem really. However, to make sure that we're getting all the data, we need to know that the mine is properly sealed. If not, then there is so many points of the emissions that are possible that this would be actually very difficult as well. So this would be my quick comment, and I'm sure that others would like to join as well. Thank you.
Yeah, would somebody like to add on this? Because otherwise, I'm afraid we cannot cover all questions if we all answer them with all speakers, because there's very limited time, 5 minutes until the end, and maybe we can come to another question. Peter, maybe this is for you. How can operators technically deal with low methane concentrations in active coal mines with below 1% methane content and large ventilation air volume? So below 1% is the limit for secure operation, but does not allow for flaring. And so this question was, thank you, Sarah, from your side. Maybe Peter, could you answer this one?
Below 1%, you say?
Yes.
Yes, I think you can run the RTO up to 1.2%. So with 1%, it's no problem to run the RTO, and you get already a lot of energy out of it.
Okay.
So there's that would be a perfect scenario to run the RTO with energy output. What you need is clear. You need some use of the energy. So one electricity can be used for the fan of the system, but 1%, it's a very nice concentration to run it. Very safe.
Okay. Thank you. Even it's below 1%, right? So that's
yes, we can go down to to 0%. These systems, that's always a discussion. The RTO runs with 0%. We don't need any methane. Then we have to add natural gas. So we need for the system here, which we have, the 3-chamber system or the also rotary one, it can run 0.2% methane. Then it's running autothermal, but it can run also with 0.1% or 0.05. So the minimum is 0, the maximum is 1.2. If you have higher than 1.2, then you have to mix it with lower concentrated VAM or with fresh air. But you can run down to 0%. The only thing is, if you are at 0%, you need additional natural gas, which you have to add. And this raises up to 0.2%, and 0.2, it's autothermal, no gas consumption. And if you're higher than 0.2, up to 1.2, you can recover a lot of energy.
Thank you. And this is possible also an answer to the question that Christine Wörlin had on the enrichment of gas to achieve a higher concentration. So another question was maybe to Sabina. How safe do you think is the flooding of exhausted mines so that the methane does not simply disappear?
Yeah, so from the flooding of abandoned or closed coal mines, I think it really depends on a case by case situation. So some of the mines will also, just flood by themselves. Others we're actually trying to take the water out. In terms of the methane, in theory, from what we understand now, flooding it should reduce the methane emissions. There have been new studies, or a study that has found actually biogenic methane, so like almost a new methane source occurring from a flooded mine. Doesn't mean that it would always occur. I think it sort of comes back to the issue of we don't really know because we haven't been measuring. There hasn't been much methane measured from other abandoned mines, flooded or not flooded. So yeah, I think it's still a question, but again, hopefully something that with the EU methane regulation and coal mines, flooded and non-flooded mines starting to measure their emissions over a longer period of time, I think this sort of question will hopefully become a bit clearer, and we'll get a bit more understanding on that.
Yeah, thank you, Sabina, for elaborating on that. Tomasz, maybe a question for you. So Patrick asked or commented that the appetite for some governments of low and middle income countries for CMM abatement is apparently very low. And it seems partly due to the associated investment and maintenance costs of the respective technologies. And do you see the business cases of methane capturing mentioned just now to apply to this lower and middle income countries to persuade these countries to take action?
I think in the absence of some kind of incentive, be it, for example, through Article 6 of the Paris Agreement or voluntary carbon markets or some other incentive, then it will be hard to have a lot of coal mine mitigation projects in low and middle income countries, unless this is an initiative of large coal companies that have pledged to decarbonizing their emissions and transitioning and having emissions goals. But I mean, there are some cases where it is, as I mentioned, you can get to a project with no net cost, but these are a select few facilities. And certainly we should be looking into that and helping with project identification. But I think the scope for these activities in these types of contexts is limited. So having an additional incentive is important, or having a regulation from the country because they're committed to their climate targets and their reduction goals.
Thank you. Maybe one last question. I know we are already 1 minute over time, but I think this question is very relevant as well. What recommendations would you give for the first steps for an initial assessment of emissions over a region? I don't know who wants to take that question. Any volunteers? Maybe Michael, Tomasz, Sabina. This is, or Chiara, something for you.
I mean, I can get started on this. I would say that the first thing is to understand a bit what are the facilities there, and if these are underground coal mines or not, and what is the type of coal that they're producing, if they have ventilation shafts or drainage systems, or if they have readings of the methane concentrations due to safety issues. If you start with that information, then you can produce in some initial estimates of what are the facilities where it's more likely that you have significant methane emissions, and then you can go and do a bit more work on project identification and assessment of mitigation potential.
Okay, anybody wants to add on that? Because if not, if that is not the case, I would like to thank you for taking part in the event and the discussion, and foremost wanted to thank you, Tomasz, Chiara, Michael, Sabina, and Peter. It was a great panel, very interesting presentations we had with great examples and relevant information. So we have learned about the main methane emitters, different types of emissions, and different steps of regulations. In the European context, the EU methane regulation as a prominent example discussed by Tomasz. We learned that a major challenge for is the CMM data collection, the lack of harmonized, transparent data, and also thank you, Chiara and Michael, for sharing the information. I encourage all participants to access the available best practice guidance that is elaborated by UNECE. Or that reporting template on CMM emissions, very interesting. And Sabina, you discussed what is holding us back. So I like the carrots and sticks illustration, definitely, that governments need to provide incentives on the one side and clear regulations on the other one, on the other side. And the example from Peter from Eisenmann built on that and illustrated that there is a business case and that CMM emissions can be captured. Very interesting. I think at least I've learned a lot today. It is an important topic that often does not get the attention it deserves. That was said by Tomasz very early in the introduction. And we also see that reflected in the amount of questions, in the discussion that is going on in the chat. Thank you so much for that. We will follow up on this one, on the questions, and with a summary on our website. But before you leave, it would be great if you could spare 2 minutes to share your thoughts and feedback on this expert exchange by clicking on the link in the chat or by scanning the QR code. Very much appreciated. So next slide, maybe. If you want to stay in touch with IKI JET, you're most welcome to register for the newsletter. Also in the chat, the links. Stay tuned on events and information around just energy transition. And next and now last slide, promise. Visit our website, the Knowledge Hub, for more information. Follow us on LinkedIn. The link is in the chat as well. With that, a final thank you for your attention. Great thank you to our panelists. It was really great, and wish you all a great day. See you at the next expert exchange of IKI JET. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.